I was 18 at the time, fresh out of high school, and absolutely convinced I knew better than everyone else around me. Looking back, that confidence was really just stubbornness, mixed with a bad temper. I fought with my parents constantly over dumb stuff. Curfews, money, nothing that actually mattered. One night, it escalated more than usual. Voices were raised, doors were slammed, and at some point my dad told me to get out and cool off for a while. He didn't mean forever. He probably didn't even mean the whole night. But I took it personally, grabbed my hoodie, and walked out with the dramatic certainty that I wasn't coming back anytime soon. I remember walking around town with no real plan, just replaying the argument in my head and getting more annoyed the longer I thought about it. I didn't want to call any friends, because I knew exactly how that would go. Their parents would call mine, and suddenly the situation would turn into a whole thing. At the time, avoiding embarrassment felt more important than common sense. By the time the sun went down, my anger had burned itself out and reality started to sink in. I was tired, cold, and needed somewhere to go. That's when I thought about the old house at the end of a dead-end road on the edge of the neighborhood. It had been abandoned for as long as I could remember. When I was younger, some friends and I had gone inside during the day a couple of times. It was empty, dusty, nothing more than a creepy-looking place people dared each other to walk through. In my head, it made sense. I'd stay there for the night, maybe just sit inside until morning. I wasn't planning to sleep. I just needed somewhere to exist without dealing with anyone. Even as I started walking toward it, I knew it was a bad idea. I told myself it would only be for a few hours. I wasn't breaking anything. I'd be gone before anyone noticed. At 18, that was enough justification. The road leading to the house had been blocked off years earlier with a metal gate. Past that, the driveway was barely visible, swallowed up by weeds and trees. I slipped around the gate and followed what I remembered was the path. The neighborhood noise faded the farther I went. No cars, no voices, just the sound of my shoes crunching on gravel and leaves. It was around 10 at night when I reached the house. The trees around it were so overgrown that I almost missed it at first. The place looked smaller than I remembered, hunched in on itself, like it was trying to disappear. The broken back door we'd used years ago was still hanging open. Inside, it smelled like damp wood and old dust. The windows were boarded up, so the only light came from the doorway behind me. Once I stepped fully inside, the darkness felt heavy. Not dramatic, just thick and uncomfortable. I stood there longer than I meant to, listening. Nothing. No animals, no wind, just quiet. I knew right away I wasn't staying there the night. That realization hit fast. Still, curiosity kept me moving. I walked through the first floor slowly, careful where I stepped. The floorboards creaked under my weight, loud enough that I winced every time. I was halfway up the staircase when I heard it. Two distinct creaks from somewhere below me, not from the stairs, from the other side of the house. I froze. I told myself it could have been the house settling, or maybe I'd shifted my weight and it echoed weirdly. But then I heard a door open, slow, controlled, somewhere near the back entrance. My stomach dropped. Whoever was down there was between me and the only way out. I stood there on the stairs for what felt like forever, barely breathing. I listened for footsteps, for anything that would tell me what was happening. Nothing. The silence after the noise was worse than the noise itself. It felt intentional, like whoever it was knew I was there. After a while, my brain started trying to rationalize it. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe the door had been loose. Maybe they'd already left. I couldn't stay frozen forever. Eventually, I took a step down, then another. I leaned around the corner at the bottom of the stairs. I didn't see anyone. The doorway was still open. The darkness beyond it looked the same as it had before. I stepped forward, and that's when I saw him. He was standing directly in front of the door, facing me, like he'd been waiting. He spoke before I could react. "Stop right there." His voice was deep and uneven, like he was tired or maybe drunk. He was wearing what looked like a police uniform. That detail alone short-circuited my fear for a second. My first thought was that I was in trouble for trespassing. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "What are you doing out here, kid?" I apologized immediately and said I was leaving. He didn't respond right away. He just stood there, head slightly tilted, like he was studying me. When he stepped closer, I noticed the uniform didn't sit right. It was loose, wrinkled, like it didn't belong to him. I couldn't see his face clearly. The shadows swallowed it completely. "Did you come here alone?" he asked. The way he said it made my skin crawl. I nodded and said yes. He took another step toward me. "And what were you looking for?" I didn't answer. I didn't know what to say. I just shook my head. After a pause, I saw his mouth move. I think he smiled. He turned and walked toward a doorway on the side of the house, one I hadn't noticed before. The room beyond it was pitch black. "Come here," he said, leaning against the frame. His tone changed slightly. Softer, almost friendly. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me not to move. I knew then that he wasn't a cop. Real or not, no part of this was right. The good thing was that he'd moved just far enough away from the exit. I didn't think it through. I just ran. I sprinted straight at the door. I heard him move behind me, fast. As I passed him, I felt his hand grab the collar of my shirt, tight enough to choke me for a split second. The fabric stretched, and then I was free. I didn't look back. I ran until my lungs burned, through the trees, past the gate, and all the way back toward town. I didn't stop until I was home. There was a police car in the driveway. My parents had reported me missing after dark. 2 actual officers were inside, talking calmly. I was still shaking, still trying to process what had just happened. I didn't tell them about the house. I didn't want to admit I'd been trespassing. I didn't want to explain why I ran from someone who might have been a cop. They didn't ask. No one ever followed up. No questions. No reports. Nothing. And that's how I know, for sure, that the man in that house wasn't real law enforcement. If he had been, there would have been consequences. There would have been paperwork. I've replayed that night more times than I can count. I know I put myself in danger. I know I made stupid choices. But I also know that if I'd stayed frozen a few seconds longer, I might not have made it out at all. That thought still keeps me up sometimes, even now. I grew up in a town so small that most people I meet now wouldn't even believe it was real. One main road, a gas station that closed at 9, and a high school that doubled as the community center. Nothing ever really happened there. As a kid, I couldn't wait to leave. As an adult, I mostly remember how quiet it was. Too quiet sometimes. Most days blurred together. School, work, home. If something broke or someone new moved in, that was news for weeks. We spent a lot of time driving aimlessly or sitting in parking lots just to kill time. Looking back, boredom did more damage than anything else. When I was around 19, I was still living at home and working part-time. My closest friend at the time was a guy named Ryan. We'd known each other since middle school, mostly bonded over the shared misery of growing up where nothing ever changed. One night in late summer, after another long, pointless evening, Ryan brought up an old place on the edge of town, an abandoned mill that everyone knew about but nobody really talked about. It had shut down years before we were born. From the road you could see parts of it through the trees, broken windows, rusted metal siding, a sagging smokestack. It sat back on county-owned land, fenced off with faded no trespassing signs that had been there forever. We weren't trying to break anything or get into trouble. We just wanted something, anything, to do. We talked ourselves into it pretty easily. Just a quick look. In and out, no big deal. We parked Ryan's truck off a dirt access road about half a mile away and walked the rest. The sun was already going down, that time of evening where everything turns gray and flat. The air smelled like dry leaves and dust. No wind, no insects, just the sound of our footsteps crunching along the path. The closer we got, the quieter it felt. Not peaceful, empty, like the sound had been drained out of the place. The trees around the mill were tall and crowded, blocking most of the remaining light. When the building finally came into view, it looked bigger up close than it ever had from the road. Darker too, like it didn't belong there anymore. We circled around until we found a gap in the fence where it had collapsed inward. Neither of us said much at that point. It wasn't fear exactly, more like a low-level discomfort we both ignored. Ryan joked about raccoons and squatters, but his voice sounded forced. We went in through a side entrance where the door had rusted halfway off its hinges. Inside, the air was stale and heavy, like it hadn't moved in years. We turned on our flashlights, and the beams caught dust floating thick in the air. Every step echoed. The floor felt solid, but it groaned under our weight. Long, slow creaks that seemed to linger. The place was stripped down to almost nothing. Old machinery bolted to the floor. Empty offices with peeling paint. Broken glass everywhere. It smelled like oil, mold, and something metallic I couldn't place. Still, nothing felt immediately dangerous, just abandoned. We moved deeper inside, checking rooms as we went. Our voices stayed low without either of us saying so. The silence felt sensitive, like we were intruding on something that didn't want noise. That's when I noticed the light. At first, I thought it was my flashlight reflecting off something, but it wasn't moving. A faint yellow glow, steady, coming from the far end of the main floor near a staircase. It was subtle enough that you could miss it if you weren't looking directly at it. My first thought was that someone else was there, maybe another group exploring, maybe a maintenance crew. Ryan suggested it could be an old emergency light running on backup power. That explanation didn't make much sense, but we both accepted it because the alternative felt worse. We told ourselves we'd just check it out and leave. The staircase led up to a narrow catwalk that ran along the upper level of the mill. As we climbed, the glow grew stronger, warmer. The air felt thicker up there. The metal walkway rattled softly beneath us, each step sounding louder than it should have. Halfway down the catwalk, I realized how quiet everything had become. Even our footsteps sounded muted now, like the building was absorbing the noise. I remember having the sudden, very clear thought that we shouldn't be there anymore. The light was coming from behind a door at the end of the walkway. An old office, maybe. The door was closed, but the glow spilled out from underneath it, steady and low. No voices, no movement. Just that light. I reached for the handle before I could really think about it. I paused with my hand there, listening. Nothing. No breathing. No shifting. I pushed the door open. Inside, the room was mostly empty. No furniture. No equipment. Just bare concrete walls and a stained floor. In the center of the room, sitting directly on the ground, was a single camping lantern turned on. That was it. No people. No bags. No sign anyone had been there recently. The lantern looked clean, almost new, like it had been placed there deliberately. The light it gave off didn't reach the corners of the room. It just sat there, humming quietly. Neither of us spoke. My chest felt tight, like I'd forgotten how to breathe properly. The idea that someone had been there recently, but wasn't anymore, hit me all at once. Then, from somewhere below us, there was a sound, heavy, fast, multiple footsteps hitting concrete, moving toward the stairs. Ryan didn't say anything. He just grabbed my arm and pulled me back. We didn't run at first. We moved as fast as we could without making noise, hearts pounding, trying not to slip on the metal walkway. The footsteps got louder. We broke into a full sprint down the stairs. The sound followed, closer than it should have been. I remember thinking how wrong it felt, that whoever it was hadn't called out, hadn't said a word. We tore through the main floor, flashlights bouncing wildly, shadows jumping along the walls. I didn't look back. I didn't want to know how close it was. The exit felt impossibly far away. We burst out through the broken door and didn't stop running until we were deep into the tree line. Branches slapped at our faces. My lungs burned. When we finally slowed down, bent over and gasping, the mill was completely silent again. No footsteps, no light, nothing. We walked back to the truck without speaking. Every sound made us flinch. I had a headache by the time we got back, a dull pressure that didn't go away for hours. Ryan dropped me off, and we barely acknowledged what had happened. In the days that followed, neither of us brought it up. It was like we'd both agreed, without saying so, to leave it alone. A few years later, after I'd moved away, I drove through town on a visit home. On a whim, I took the old access road out toward the mill. It was gone. The building had been completely demolished. Fresh fencing surrounded the area. New signs. The land looked cleared, flat, like nothing had ever stood there at all. I still don't know who left that lantern or why. I don't know who or what was running toward us in that building. I've tried to rationalize it over the years, but nothing quite fits. All I know is that it's the most afraid I've ever been, and no matter how much time passes, I don't think that feeling will ever really leave me. I was about 3 weeks into a long solo road trip when this happened. I'd quit my job earlier that spring and decided to spend the summer driving across the country, camping most nights and stopping wherever looked interesting. I wasn't on a tight schedule. The whole point was to explore places I normally wouldn't bother with if I only had a weekend or a vacation window. At the time, I was cutting through a rural stretch of the Midwest, bouncing between state highways and back roads. I'd spent the morning hiking a nearby conservation area and planned to find a cheap campground or public land to stay the night. While fueling up at a small-town gas station, I noticed a faded sign across the road pointing toward an old industrial area. It mentioned a closed quarry and something about historical buildings. I asked the cashier about it, more out of curiosity than anything else. She shrugged and said most of it had been abandoned for decades. Apparently, it used to be a small mining and processing site that supported a nearby town, but when the operation shut down, everything else slowly died with it. No one maintained it anymore, and there wasn't much reason to go out there unless you were exploring or trespassing. That last word made her give me a look, like she was quietly advising against it. I've always been interested in abandoned places. I'd explored old factories, schools, and houses before, usually closer to cities where graffiti and signs of other visitors were everywhere. This sounded different. It wasn't an urban ruin. It was out in the middle of farmland and woods, far from anything else. That alone made it feel unusual, but not in a bad way. More like a quiet detour before finding a place to sleep. The road leading out there narrowed quickly, turning from cracked asphalt into gravel. Cornfields gave way to patches of trees, and eventually the road ended at a rusted gate that had been pushed halfway open. There were no trespassing signs that I could see, just a lot of old warning placards about unstable ground and restricted access that looked like they hadn't been updated since the 1980s. I parked off to the side and walked in. It was early afternoon, but the sky had that dull, overcast look that flattens everything, like the light never quite decides what it's doing. The air was humid and heavy. The first thing I noticed was how quiet it was. No traffic noise, no machinery, not even much wind. Just insects buzzing somewhere out of sight. The abandoned structures came into view slowly. Low concrete buildings with broken windows. A couple of rusted metal sheds. A tall, skeletal frame that I assumed had once supported some kind of conveyor or crane system. Grass and weeds had swallowed most of the paths, and small trees were growing out of cracks in the concrete. Compared to other abandoned places I'd been to, this one felt untouched. No spray paint, no beer cans, no footprints in the dust. At first, it was just interesting. I walked around taking photos, reading the occasional weathered sign, trying to imagine what it must have been like when people actually worked there. But after maybe 15 minutes, I started feeling uneasy in a way I couldn't immediately explain. It wasn't fear exactly, more like the sense that I didn't quite belong there. I told myself that was normal. Abandoned places tend to feel strange, especially when you're alone. The quiet messes with your head. Every sound stands out more than it should. I kept walking, circling one of the larger buildings that looked like it had once housed offices or equipment controls. That's when I noticed the sound. At first, it was so faint I thought it was just wind pushing through a broken window. But it was too steady for that. A low, intermittent clanking noise, like metal lightly tapping against metal. It wasn't loud. It came in short bursts, then stopped, then started again. I stood still to listen, trying to pinpoint where it was coming from. It seemed to be coming from deeper inside the site, closer to the quarry itself. I considered turning back, but curiosity won out. I told myself it could be an old piece of metal swaying somewhere, or even an animal brushing up against debris. There was no reason to assume anything worse. As I walked, the sound stopped. The sudden silence felt heavier than the noise had. I became aware of my own footsteps, the soft crunch of gravel and weeds under my boots. I slowed down, half expecting the clanking to start again, but it didn't. The quarry pit was partially visible through the trees, a massive dark depression in the ground with steep sides. I didn't get too close to the edge, but I could feel the temperature change as I approached. Cooler air drifted out from below, carrying a damp, earthy smell. That's when the feeling of being watched really kicked in. It wasn't dramatic, no sudden jolt or panic. Just a persistent awareness, like when you're in a room with someone standing behind you, you haven't turned around yet. I kept glancing over my shoulder, scanning the tree line, telling myself I was being paranoid. There were plenty of logical explanations. Animals lived out here. Maybe another explorer had wandered in, and I just hadn't seen them yet. I remember thinking how silly it would be to get scared and leave when nothing had actually happened. So I stayed. I even walked into one of the smaller buildings near the quarry, stepping carefully over broken glass and debris. Inside it was darker, but not pitch black. Light filtered in through cracks and shattered windows. Old equipment sat rusting in place, covered in dust. That's when I heard footsteps. They weren't loud, just slow, deliberate crunches outside, matching the sound gravel would make under a boot. I froze, listening. The steps stopped. A few seconds passed. Then they started again, closer this time. I called out, asking if anyone was there. My voice sounded strange in the still air, like it didn't quite belong. No one answered. The footsteps stopped again. I waited, heart pounding harder now. Every instinct told me to leave, but I didn't want to overreact. I stepped back outside, scanning the area. Nothing. No movement. No voices. Just the empty buildings and trees. I told myself it must have been an animal, deer maybe, or someone else who didn't want to be seen. Either way, it didn't mean I was in immediate danger. I decided to head back toward my car, but not rush. I didn't want to look scared. That decision almost got me stuck there longer than I should have been. As I walked back along the overgrown path, the clanking noise started again, louder this time. It wasn't random anymore. It seemed to follow my movement, stopping when I stopped, starting when I walked. My stomach tightened, and the rational explanations I'd been clinging to started falling apart. Then I heard breathing. It was behind me, close enough that I could hear it over my own. I didn't turn around right away. I don't know why. Maybe part of me was hoping that if I ignored it, it would go away. But the sound didn't fade. It stayed there, steady and unmistakably human. That was the breaking point. I turned and saw movement near one of the buildings, a shape pulling back into shadow. I didn't wait to get a better look. I ran, not full sprint at first, but fast enough that my footsteps echoed loudly in my ears. I could hear something moving behind me, keeping pace, not rushing like it didn't need to. I burst out of the gate area and reached my car, fumbling with the keys so badly I dropped them once. When I finally got inside and locked the doors, I sat there shaking, staring at the road ahead. I didn't see anyone come out after me. No one shouted. No footsteps followed onto the gravel. I drove away without looking back. I ended up parking at a truck stop miles down the road and sitting there until nightfall, replaying everything in my head. Maybe it was a squatter. Maybe someone else exploring who thought it would be funny to mess with me. Maybe I'd imagined parts of it because I was alone and already uneasy. But the timing of the sounds, the footsteps, the breathing, none of it felt random. It felt intentional. I never went back. And I didn't tell many people about it at first because I didn't want to sound dramatic. Even now, I don't claim anything supernatural happened. I just know that whatever was out there didn't want to be seen, and it didn't want me there. Some places are abandoned for a reason, and sometimes being empty doesn't mean being unoccupied.